This is Cornel West. This is an interesting one. So let's watch this video or this interview. This is also with Dana Bash of Cornel West talking about the Uncommitted campaign.
News this morning on the Robert F. Kennedy campaign. A super PAC supporting him says they've gathered enough signatures to get him on the ballot in two pivotal battleground states, Arizona and Georgia. Those signatures still need to be validated and could face court challenges, but so far he's only confirmed to be on the ballot in one state, Utah. My next guest is another third-party candidate trying to get on as many ballots as he can. Professor Cornel West joins me now. Thank you so much for being here. Sir, I want to start with Michigan, which is voting today. Some Democrats who are frustrated with President Biden's response to the Israel-Gaza war, they're urging residents to vote uncommitted, effectively against the president. Now, yesterday he announced progress in a deal for a temporary ceasefire in exchange for a hostage release. Should that help, never mind what it means for the region, which is the most important, but just on the raw politics of it, should that help the president politically?
Well, we shall see. But I mean, part of the problem is we can't reduce what's going on in Gaza to some kind of electoral political strategy. I mean, we've seen the example of our dear brother, Aaron Bushnell. When he set himself on fire. And
now, you saw that shock to Dana Bash's system when he mentioned Aaron Bushnell. And for those that don't know, the legend of Aaron Bushnell, he's the young airman, that active airman that lit himself on fire to protest the genocide in Gaza. And corporate media has been trying their best not to talk about it as much. At first, they held off from talking about it at all for a long time. Then they had to address it. And he brings it up here, which is unsettling to Dana Bash, as you saw her reaction there. But I'll rewind it a little bit and let him continue.
With President Biden's response to the Israel-Gaza war, they're urging residents to vote uncommitted, effectively against the president. Now, yesterday he announced progress in a deal for a temporary ceasefire in exchange for a hostage release. Should that help, never mind what it means for the region, which is the most important, but just on the raw politics of it, should that help the president politically?
Well, we shall see. But I mean, part of the problem is we can't reduce what's going on in Gaza to some kind of electoral political strategy. I mean, we've seen the example of our dear brother, Aaron Bushnell. When he set himself on fire and killed himself, what was he saying? These are moral issues and moral causes. These are not just brands and strategies and tactics. And as you know, Sister Dana, so much American politics is about strategy and tactic. These are deeply moral and spiritual issues having to do with arbitrary power being used. And when I hear Sister Rashida say, well, Biden is not hearing us, no, Biden is enabling the killing of us. That's what's taking place here. And so you can imagine that my Arab brothers and sisters in Dearborn and other places are saying, we're not just pieces to be moved on a chessboard. These are our families. This is mama and daddy. This is grandmama and granddaddy. It reminds me in some ways of the rabbis who marched in the early 40s, led by the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And FDR wouldn't even come out of the White House. He sent Henry Wallace, and those rabbis were sitting there saying, look, massacres are taking place. War crimes are taking place. Crimes against humanity, genocide is taking place. What did the White House do in the early 40s? Nothing at all, hardly. Why? Because it was an electoral political issue. The Jewish vote didn't mean X. The Jewish vote didn't mean Y. These are human beings, and America is enabling the killing of them. So it is now in 2024. Where is the space for truth, justice, love in a moment of electoral politics? And
this is where Cornel West flourishes in a lecture style conversation, period. That's it. It does not translate into anything else other than his ability to go in these spaces. And because of his class, he understands there is a boundary, even to his quote unquote radical speech. There are boundaries to that. And he pushes the limit in corporate media's eyes, not in our eyes. This is not pushing the limit at all or radical at all, but he pushes the limit in their eyes. And he's allowed to do this as long as it's not a real challenge to power, like coming on here and saying they need to stop funding Israel forever. Israel needs to go ahead and give this land back to Palestine. You don't hear him saying nothing like that. Those are a bridge too far. So let's continue.
And barbarity. That's the question.
Professor West, what about the other side of the argument? Not that there's any appropriate side to the killing of innocent civilians. We should just say that flatly. But when it comes to
absolutely,
when it comes to war and retaliatory war, which is what this is, for lots of reasons.
When it comes to war and retaliatory war, this is where Cornel West should say, this is not a retaliatory war. They've been occupying Gaza. They've been occupying Palestine for decades. This is not retaliatory. That should be the response. Let's see if it is.
The biggest is what Hamas did, the terror attack inside of Israel, but also currently the hostages who are still there. Do you think that there is, first of all, on the hostages, but second of all, just on Hamas, is there?
You see what I spoke about earlier, how corporate media will not allow Palestinian suffering or the telling of a Palestinian suffering without immediate injections of so-called Israeli equivalent suffering. No, the attack, the so-called attack, the military attack, it wasn't a terrorist attack. No, the military attack by the military arm of Hamas. Let's just continue.
Do you believe in the idea of eradicating a terrorist group like Hamas, which did such barbaric things to innocent civilians?
How come they have such a broad vocabulary when it comes to this so-called suffering of October 7th? But their adjective machine somehow loses power when it's time to discuss Palestinians. Oh, I send prayers to Palestinians, and then they have all these long list of adjectives for Israelis.
Well, one, I mean, you and I know that a Jewish life has exactly the same value as a Palestinian life. A Palestinian baby has the same value as a Jewish baby. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you get at the roots of it? Anytime you kill an innocent person, that is a crime against humanity. Did Hamas commit war crimes? Absolutely. Murder is murder. But at the same time, you and I also know that the root of what we're talking about here is an ugly occupation,
Okay. At least he saved himself with that one there. What social democrats refuse to do, and what social democrats have made the deal with, is the police state and the military state. That's what social democrats are fine with making a deal with. So that's why he has this take on Hamas that he has. But let's let him continue with this second part. I'm going to rewind it just 5 seconds here.
The root of what we're talking about here is an ugly occupation.
So he at least says this part. He goes, this is the problem with social democracy, Democrats. And these liberals, they good on one issue, and then they're just as bad on the same issue on a different point. Like he is right here. He's saying the right part, that is occupation. So if what you're saying about occupation is true, Cornel West, then how can what Hamas do be terrorist? That is illogical. You're saying on one hand there is an occupation happening in Palestine. Let's understand what an occupation is. That's a home invasion. So there's a home invasion, But I come and do something to the home invader, hit him over the head with a hammer. That's terrorism to you?
Is an embargo and siege. And
so
then
even though he came on here and said a bunch of great stuff, you see the issue with social democrats and liberals here. It's never a full-throated support. It's never a full-throated solidarity.
then we can call for a ceasefire. So in calling for a ceasefire, it ought to be on the way to get at the roots of the problem, which is the ending of an occupation, so that you can then have forms of resistance that don't have to take the form of killing innocent people. Now, I believe in just war. Combatants can kill combatants. I'm not like Martin Luther King. I'm not a pacifist. But
what? Combatants can kill combat? That's exactly what happened with Hamas on October 7th. That was a military exercise. I'm sorry, that was a military what's the right word? That was a military campaign on October 7th. This is the reason why the death toll numbers started to dwindle, because they had to accept that a lot of those deaths were from military targets. You see how what he's saying, this doesn't make any sense. And there's an occupation, so they can't resist militarily from an occupation, again, which is a home invasion. This guy, social democracy, it's not just him. It's not just Cornel. It's social democrats that do this.
But combatants must not kill civilians or innocent people, no matter who it is, IDF or Hamas. But the problem is, if you're going to call Hamas a terrorist group and the IDF is killing innocent people, they're terrorists too.
There you go. You see how he does something good and does something bad, and say something good and say something bad. This is the issue with social democrats and the allyship with social democrats. They're very unpredictable. You can't really strategize with somebody who's unpredictable, who's up and down like this. But this is a great point that he makes here. That this quite possibly might be the first time I've heard it on TV. I'm gonna let him say it again.
Occupation, so that you can then have forms of resistance that don't have to take the form of killing innocent people. Now, I believe in just war. Combatants can kill combatants. I'm not like Martin Luther King. I'm not a pacifist. But combatants must not kill civilians or innocent people, no matter who it is, IDF or Hamas. But the problem is, if you're going to call Hamas a terrorist group and the IDF is killing innocent people, they're terrorists too. If American soldiers kill innocent people, they're terrorists too. We have to be morally consistent in our language, in our deeds. And this is what I pull from Hebrew scripture. This is what I pull from following a Palestinian Jew named Jesus.
And the IDF argument, you heard Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday arguing wholeheartedly that the big difference is that Hamas went out and sought out civilians. What the IDF is doing is trying to get rid of Hamas. And
so the refugee camps, this is what's the right word? This is the right word. This is what Western chauvinist perspective that she has here. It's where you can clearly see that what Israel is telling you about trying to keep civilians alive is clearly a lie. But because they say it, Western chauvinist countries go, well, Israel said they're trying. Israel said they're trying. There's one Hamas person in the building, 1,000 patients, innocent patients. Israel bombs it, kills 1,000 patients and the Hamas person. What the United States go? They said they tried. It's not believable. It's not believable. It's simply not believable to have this stance about Israel.
and the civilians are unfortunately getting killed in the
lie.
crossfire. I'm not equating the two in terms of life as a life, but the argument is
why are you defending the IDF at all? Why are you coming in interjecting this at all? You don't go when you have an pro-Israeli person come on and then they say some nonsense. You don't go, well, the people in Gaza say you guys are occupying them. You don't do that sort of defending. Truly despicable, our media personality. That's what they are. They're not journalists. Truly despicable. They're unabashed sort of prostitution of their dignity and integrity.
That Hamas sought out civilians and the IDF is not.
Well, I mean, the difference there would be historically over the last 75 years, we've got overwhelming evidence that the IDF has killed innocent people and is killing innocent children right now. And each one of those children are not a shield of a Hamas soldier. So that the language on the one hand goes in one direction, the action goes in another direction. But the crucial thing is we've got to keep the moral and spiritual issues at the center. And
that was his way of saying the IDF and Israel are some liars. That was his nice way of saying that.
That's one of the problems with American politics these days. It's all about money. It's all about status and spectacle. What about the human beings who are suffering, be they mass incarcerated in ghettos or barrios or poor whites, or be they in Gaza, or be they frightened in other parts of the world?
Let's make a hard turn now to politics, since you mentioned it. We're talking about you as a candidate. You're running as an independent candidate, independent of the parties you were talking about. You're currently on the ballot in 3 states: Alaska, Oregon, South Carolina.
Alaska, Oregon, and South Carolina. I know what. I'm just gonna leave this guy alone, man. Let's just go on. It's a lost cause. This guy's a lost cause. So let's just move on. I was gonna comment on it, but he is a fucking lost cause, bro. It's done for this guy.